because it came back to my mind that I told you I was going to talk about the Queen Esther and this story also about why we should not be trying to cancel Candace Owens.
What if your courage in the face of danger could change the fate of an entire nation? Queen Esther's story is one of remarkable bravery and divine intervention. From being an orphan Jewish girl in exile to becoming a queen who saved her people from annihilation, Esther's journey is a powerful reminder that we are often placed in pivotal moments for such a time as this. Join us as we dive deep into Esther's story, unraveling fascinating details that many may not know. And be sure to subscribe to our channel for more captivating biblical stories that inspire and transform. The story of Esther begins in the Persian Empire during the reign of King Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus. Esther, originally named Hadassah, was a Jewish girl living in exile. Orphaned at a young age, she was raised by her cousin Mordecai, who became her guardian and mentor. Life in exile was not easy for the Jews, as they lived far from their homeland, constantly navigating a culture that was not their own. Still, Esther's upbringing under Mordecai's guidance shaped her faith and character. When King Xerxes deposed his queen, Vashti, for refusing to appear before him, he ordered a search for a new queen. The most beautiful young women from all 127 provinces of his empire were gathered, and Esther was among them. Despite her humble background, Esther's beauty and grace captured the attention of Haggai, the eunuch in charge of the king's harem. Haggai provided her with the finest beauty treatments, and she quickly found favor in his eyes. However, Esther's beauty was not her only strength. She carried herself with a quiet humility and wisdom that set her apart. Mordecai advised her to keep her Jewish identity hidden, and she obeyed. This decision would become crucial as her story unfolded. When Esther was brought before King Xerxes, he was immediately captivated by her, and she found favor in his sight. Without hesitation, Xerxes placed the royal crown on her head, making her the new queen of Persia. Esther's sudden rise to power might seem like a fairy tale, but there was much more at work behind the scenes. Mordecai, her faithful cousin, remained a constant figure in her life. He stayed close to the palace gates to keep an eye on Esther and to ensure that she remained safe. During this time, Mordecai uncovered a plot to assassinate King Xerxes and alerted Esther, who informed the king. The conspirators were arrested, and Mordecai's loyalty was recorded in the royal chronicles, though no immediate reward came his way. This pivotal moment hints at the greater purpose behind Esther's position. She did not rise to royalty merely by chance. God had placed her in the palace for a reason, although that purpose remained unclear to her at this point. Esther's true test of courage and faith was yet to come, and it would be one that would challenge not only her personal safety, but also the fate of her entire people. The story of Esther is a reminder that even when we cannot see the full picture, God is at work behind the scenes. Esther's journey from a Jewish orphan to the Queen of Persia was no coincidence. It was a divine setup for something much greater. While Esther adjusted to her new life as queen, a much darker story was developing within the Persian court. Haman, a high-ranking official and the king's most trusted advisor, had risen to power with an immense sense of pride and arrogance. His ego was easily bruised, especially by Mordecai, who consistently refused to bow to him as was custom. Mordecai's defiance was driven by his faith, as Jews were forbidden to worship anyone but God. However, Haman viewed this as a personal affront. Haman's disdain for Mordecai quickly grew into hatred for all Jews living within the empire. His pride clouded his judgment, and he devised a plan not only to punish Mordecai, but to annihilate the entire Jewish population. He approached King Xerxes with a twisted proposal, framing the Jews as a rebellious and dangerous people who followed their own laws rather than the king's. Xerxes, trusting his advisor without question, gave Haman the authority to issue a decree calling for the destruction of all Jews in the empire. What many people may not realize is that Xerxes had no idea that his own queen was Jewish. The decree was set for the 13th day of the 12th month, and Haman's plan was well underway. With the king's signet ring in hand, Haman sealed the fate of the Jewish people. The edict spread quickly throughout the provinces, and fear gripped the Jewish community as they faced imminent death. Mordecai, upon hearing of this decree, was devastated. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and mourned publicly in the streets of Susa, the capital city. His distress reached Esther in the palace, and she sent a messenger to find out what had happened. Mordecai explained the dire situation and urged her to go before the king to plead for her people. This moment was pivotal. Esther, though queen, was not immune to the laws of the land. Approaching the king without being summoned was punishable by death unless the king extended his golden scepter. Esther had not been called to see Xerxes in over 30 days, and her position as queen did not guarantee her safety. More so, she had yet to reveal her Jewish identity, a secret she had kept on Mordecai's advice. Mordecai's words to Esther struck deep. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? His message was clear. Esther's role as queen was no accident. She had been placed in this position by God for this very moment. The fate of the Jewish people rested on her shoulders. Esther was faced with a decision that could cost her life. If she approached the king uninvited, she risked death. Yet, if she remained silent, her people would perish. The weight of this decision was heavy, but Esther showed incredible faith and courage. She sent a message to Mordecai, instructing him to gather all the Jews in Susa to fast and pray for 3 days and nights. She, too, would fast along with her maidservants. After the 3 days, she would go to the king, and if it meant her death, so be it. If I perish, she declared. Esther's courage is often celebrated, but what's often overlooked is the intense pressure she faced as a young woman. Though queen, she had little power. Her decision to approach the king was not just a matter of bravery, but also a deep act of faith in God's plan. Many people may not realize the level of trust Esther placed in God during this perilous time. She knew that without divine intervention, her efforts could be futile. On the 3rd day of the fast, Esther dressed in her royal robes and approached the inner court of the king's palace. The tension must have been unbearable as she stood, waiting to see if the king would extend his golden scepter. To her immense relief, King Xerxes held out the scepter, signaling that she was welcome. Esther, though nervous, maintained her composure and grace as she approached the king. Xerxes, seeing Esther's concern, asked what troubled her and offered her anything, even up to half his kingdom. Instead of immediately revealing her request, Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. This was a strategic move on Esther's part, showing her wisdom and patience. She knew that the timing had to be perfect for her request to be granted. During the banquet, Esther once again refrained from making her petition known, and instead invited the king and Haman to another banquet the following day. This delay was not merely a tactic. It was divinely timed. That very night, the king experienced a restless sleep and ordered the royal chronicles to be read to him. It was then that he was reminded of Mordecai's previous act of loyalty in exposing a plot to assassinate the king. This discovery would play a crucial role in the unfolding events. Haman, the antagonist in this story, was riding high on his perceived invincibility. He had secured the king's favor, and his plot to destroy the Jewish people seemed unstoppable. Yet, as the Bible often illustrates, pride comes before a fall. Haman's downfall was imminent, though he remained blissfully unaware. His hatred for Mordecai had reached such a fever pitch that he ordered the construction of an enormous gallows, 75 feet high, upon which he intended to hang Mordecai. In the morning, Haman entered the king's court, fully intending to request Mordecai's execution. Before he could speak, King Xerxes asked Haman how best to honor someone who had pleased the king. Thinking the king was referring to himself, Haman suggested a lavish display of honor, dressing the man in royal robes, having him ride on the king's horse, and parading him through the city streets while a royal official proclaimed the man's greatness. Imagine Haman's shock and horror when King Xerxes commanded that he bestow this very honor on Mordecai, the man Haman so desperately wanted dead. Haman, humiliated, was forced to lead Mordecai through the streets of Susa, singing his praises. This was the first significant sign of Haman's downfall, but it wouldn't be the last. That evening, at Queen Esther's second banquet, the time had come for Esther to reveal her true identity. As the three sat together, King Xerxes, Queen Esther, and Haman, Esther courageously revealed her heritage as a Jew and exposed Haman's wicked plot to destroy her people. Xerxes, enraged by this revelation, stormed out of the room to collect his thoughts. Haman, realizing his life was in danger, threw himself at Esther, begging for mercy. However, when King Xerxes returned to the banquet hall and saw Haman falling on Esther's couch, he misinterpreted the situation, thinking Haman was assaulting the queen. The king's anger boiled over, and he ordered Haman's immediate execution. Ironically, Haman was hanged on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. The divine irony in this turn of events is profound. Haman, who had plotted the destruction of Mordecai and the Jews, was instead the one who faced a swift and humiliating death. Haman's downfall teaches a critical lesson about pride, arrogance, and the danger of plotting evil. What many don't realize is that the timing of these events was no coincidence. God had orchestrated each moment, from the king's sleepless night to Esther's wise patience, ensuring that Haman's plan would ultimately fail. Although Haman had met his end, the danger to the Jewish people was not yet over. The decree to annihilate the Jews was still in effect, and according to Persian law, a royal edict could not simply be undone. Esther's bravery and Haman's execution had created a critical opening, but the salvation of her people still hung in the balance. Once again, Esther approached King Xerxes, this time with a more daring request. She pleaded for a way to save the Jews from the decree of death that Haman had crafted. The king, moved by Esther's courage and his affection for her, permitted Mordecai to issue a new decree on behalf of the Jewish people. Mordecai, now elevated to a high-ranking position within the empire, acted swiftly. The new decree allowed the Jews to defend themselves against anyone who sought to harm them on the designated day of the massacre. This new law was sent to all 127 provinces, from India to Ethiopia, ensuring that the Jewish communities throughout the empire had the legal right to protect themselves. The Jews, who had once been filled with fear and dread, were now empowered to fight back. When the fateful day arrived, the tables turned, and the Jewish people triumphed over their enemies. Throughout the empire, they defended themselves and won decisive victories. What was meant to be a day of destruction became a day of deliverance. This reversal of fortunes was a monumental moment in Jewish history. To commemorate this great victory, The festival of Purim was established. Purim, which means lots, refers to the lots Haman cast to determine the date of the massacre. Instead of a day of mourning, Purim became a day of feasting, rejoicing, and giving gifts to one another and to the poor. It is celebrated by Jews worldwide to this day, serving as a reminder of God's faithfulness and the courage of Queen Esther. But the legacy of Esther goes beyond just Purim. Her story is one of divine providence, where God worked through seemingly ordinary people and events to bring about extraordinary deliverance. Esther's willingness to risk her life, her wisdom in timing her requests, and her faith in God's plan all played critical roles in saving her people. Many people overlook the level of strategic thinking and faith that Esther exhibited. She wasn't just a beautiful queen. She was a courageous leader whose actions changed the course of history. Mordecai, too, rose to prominence after these events, becoming second in command to King Xerxes. His loyalty to the king and his dedication to his people brought about peace and security for the Jews during his tenure. The story of Esther reminds us that no matter how dark the circumstances may appear, God is always at work. He raises up individuals at the right time and places them in positions of influence for his purposes. Esther's story is a testimony to the power of faith, courage, and divine timing, offering hope that even in the most desperate situations, God can bring about salvation and victory. Esther's story is a timeless reminder that we are often placed in critical moments for a purpose greater than ourselves. If you've been inspired by her courage and faith, don't miss out on.
Okay. I had to share that story with all those on the Democrat Party trying to tear down my sister Candace Owens. What God has used her for, she saved us from the Democrat Party. Okay? And God had to use her. During that time, God had to use her because y'all up here promoting up Kamala, who also was going to continue to carry on the plan that Biden had for us. But y'all can hate on Trump all you want to. But that sister there saved a whole lot of us from on that team with the Democrats. So, gotta go.